This is the J. Scott Outdoors podcast on Western big game hunting and fishing, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more. Go to GoHunt.com/insider and use the J. Scott promo code when signing up to receive a $50 Coues gift card. I'm your host, J. Scott, and I live and breathe hunting and fishing, spending half the year in the field experiencing God's creation. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about our adventures. Guys, welcome to the podcast. Today is going to be a two-part series with Adam Bronson of Bronson Outfitting and Epic Outdoors. And we're going to be going over the Utah application booklet and all of the big game animals to apply for in Utah. And we're going to go through the different season dates, all the ins and outs of the draw, bonus points, all the different things it's going to take to get a tag in Utah for this upcoming fall season. It's going to be a great two-part episode. Before we get to that, I wanted to point out a couple things. First of which, here in Arizona, the Big Boquillas Ranch has reached an agreement with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and you can go to huntbigbowranch.com, click on the hunt access rates, and you will notice that the permitted price is basically $80 across the board, and there's a hunter assistant price, so anybody that's going to be with you on your hunt on the big bow also has to pay $80. And the price for the early antlerless elk, the late antlerless elk, and the archery antlerless elk is $50 and a $50 hunter assist price. I want to applaud the Big Bow Ranch and the Game and Fish for coming to a resolution. It was looking like sportsmen were going to have to pay $500 access fee, and that they were also going to limit the tag numbers, but that has indeed been nullified, and the new access rate is $80. I believe that's up $20 from the $60 rate last year. And I'd like to point out that this ranch, whether we like it or not, is private property according to the state of Arizona. And yes, it is checkerboarded, but if you read the laws and the rules, they could easily lock this ranch off and we not have access to the entire ranch. Whether you like it or not, that doesn't even come into play. What comes into play is the law, and we have a great privilege to hunt an unbelievable 750,000 acre ranch. And I think it's important for all of us to remember that as sportsmen, we need to take care of that property. We need to thank the ranch employees when we see them, and we need to act on our best behavior so that in future generations and future years, the leasee and the owner of the ranch will want us there. So, I mean, all it takes is one bad sportsman to ruin it for everybody. And I think everybody that has been involved in this controversy knows that, a couple of people mess it up for the whole. So if you see trash and it's not yours, pick it up. If you see someone breaking the rules, turn them in. And speaking of rules, they've got a whole list of rules. If you go to the website, huntbigbowranch.com, there's ranch rules. There's some changes in some of the rules. Be aware of all the rules and follow them. It's real easy. They're going out of their way to give us a right to hunt on their property, and we need to take advantage of that opportunity. But we also need to make sure that we as sportsmen take care of their property so that they want us back. So I applaud the Game and Fish and all parties involved in coming to a resolution. Guys, I wanted to tell you about the February Go Hunt Insider giveaway. This month, the month of February, they're giving away 6 Outdoorsman's machined aluminum tripod and tripod heads. That is a retail value of $5,000. Each month, Go Hunt Insider members, random names are pulled from the list of the insider members, and they give away awesome gear like custom rifles, optics, apparel, landowner tags. They gave away Coues sleeping bags, 100 phone scope adapters, Coues backpacks, and some unreal hunts, including a $22,000 Doll sheep hunt this summer, elk hunts, mule deer hunts, antelope hunts. All you have to do is be a GoHunt.com insider member to have a chance to win. And it's an incredible opportunity every single month. If you're not already an insider member, go to gohunt.com/insider, click on the blue Join Now button, use the J Scott promo code. You're automatically going to get a $50 Coues gift card in return. It's a great value. Here in this application season, GoHunt.com Insider has released their draw odds and as well as their filtering 2.0 system. And, everyone that I talk to really likes these new draw odds, and it fits really well in the filtering 2.0 system. I am currently going through my Utah applications, and it's amazing how you can click on the unit and it gives you all the draw odds. It gives you the applicants last year with how many points that they applied, and you can start trying to calculate where you need to be and which hunts you want to put in for. So I applaud the guys over at GoHunt.com for putting so much time and effort into this resource, and it is proving to be the greatest resource for any Western big game hunter out there. And so I encourage you guys to check it out. This is going to be a great episode with Adam Bronson. And we're going to go through all the ins and outs of Utah. I want to thank you guys, the listeners, for all of your support that you give this podcast. And I really appreciate all the positive comments and the feedback and even some of the constructive criticism that I receive through my email. If you'd like to send me a message, you can send it to jscottoutdoors@gmail.com, and I try and respond immediately. If you don't get a response immediately, it probably means I'm in the field. But other than that, I try and respond, within minutes of getting the emails, and certainly the same day. And I just appreciate all the feedback. I get a lot of emails with people requesting different people to be on the podcast, different topics and different subjects that people want to hear. And I just really appreciate that. The support is amazing. Last month, the month of January, we had 168,000 downloads. And, without you guys supporting this podcast, it wouldn't be possible. Obviously, I'd also like to thank our sponsors of this podcast. Obviously, GoHunt.com Insider has been a title sponsor of this podcast from virtually the beginning. We've got the Outdoorsman's, we've got Western Hunter and Elk Hunter magazines, we've got Phone Scope, Wilderness Athlete, and Utah Hydrographics. And I would ask you guys to look them up on social media, go to their websites, call them on the phone, and support them. These are great companies. I know all of these guys, and these are great people. They make great products. And without these sponsors, I wouldn't be able to put as much time as I do into this podcast. And I just want to thank them and thank you guys. And let's get right to the episode here with Adam Bronson. Now, remember, this is a part 1 of 2 series, and we're going to go over every big game animal in Utah. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we've got a cool episode with Adam Bronson of Bronson Outfitting and Epic Outdoors. Adam has been on the podcast before, and his podcast was very well received. I got a lot of great comments and feedback. Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you, Jay?
Oh, doing just fine. I saw that you actually came down to Arizona and shot a Coues deer. Was that your first Coues deer hunt?
Yeah, it was. I'm one of those guys that, mule deer is mean a lot to me, and I've got a grundle of mule deer points in Arizona. So, I've never been able to, apply for the Coues deer hunts justifiably until I get that out of the way. I ended up hunting down on San Carlos, where I hunted that. Had a great time with a couple of friends. We were down there in part of that wild weather, just, unbelievable amounts of rain and then snow, which made for some kind of cool hunting conditions when it all broke. It looked like ants in a sugar bowl out there rutting around with everything flocked white. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, I saw the picture of the buck you shot. It's cool with the meat laid out on the snow. And I guess I'd like to ask you kind of your first impressions of Coues deer and maybe some of the things that you witnessed that you thought were pretty cool or unique to that animal.
Well, I've had a lot of friends hunt them over the years. Some of my friends just hunt Coues deer exclusively in Arizona, friends from here in Utah, and they draw every 2 or 3 years and go hunt them. And having talked with them and obviously enough people and understanding that you just sit on your butt all day is pretty much how you hunt Coues deer, which is a lot how we hunt some of the big mule deer that we're targeting and the sheep that I love to hunt and guide up here. And so there really wasn't a surprise or a thought that I wouldn't like it. And that was definitely the case. I had a great time down there. A lot of diverse country. They're not found in one spot or another. They're found up in the ponderosas, up high and thick stuff. And once in a while you'll see them there and wonder, how would you ever kill one here if you didn't see it run across the road type thing? And then you're down in the desert floor. Hunting the rut in January obviously, is fun, and you get to experience that obviously in Mexico. And the deer are just a lot more active than they would be early and otherwise. And that made for a fun time. We looked over a lot of bucks. Obviously I'm not experienced as many people hunting them, but we had a great time, and I'm ready to go back. I know that. So whether it be there, Mexico, or both, I want to keep doing that. That was fun.
Yeah, for sure. You guys, I believe the timing you hit that big storm where we had 2 or 3 days of quite a bit of moisture and snow and what have you. One question I would ask is, with that weather, did you notice the deer activity during the storm was minimal? And then what did you notice after the storm broke?
Yeah, and it was, there was parts that it was drizzling rain that we'd try to get out on ranges and do our thing, and then there were literally times when it was coming down so hard that I don't know what the deer were doing, because I know I was in my wall tent. it was that bad. And then when it turned to snow, I was actually relieved. It just made getting around a lot easier, and obviously then visibility and picking up them little buggers in the thick brush and whatnot was really going to be good. We were really looking forward to that, and it was excellent. The day it broke, I killed my buck, and then 2 days later, had a friend killed a 111 buck, and it was a great hunt. So,
yeah, for sure. The times, not many times, but the times that I've been able to hunt them in the snow, it seems like maybe for like the first hour, they're just laying there and they're cold, but as soon as they decide to get up, the contrast with their bodies, which, you experience, I'm sure, in Utah a lot with your mule deer. But it's fairly unique with Coues to have snow, and man, they stick out, and they sure like to stand in the sun and be out in the open. So it's definitely a target-rich environment after a snowstorm, and you get a cold, crisp day the next day. It seems like they're really active all day.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of some of our southern Utah units or Colorado units that I've hunted mule deer a lot, where you have that really, really thick gamble oak that's lost its leaves and it's gray. And obviously the deer that time of year in, late October, early November are gray, and they get in that stuff without snow and they can almost disappear. And when you get snow in that, they literally just pop out, and it reminded me of that. So.
Yeah, cool. Did you notice sometimes it was hard to actually kill a buck that was rutting? I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I know we've talked about it here on the podcast with some other guests, in that, one great thing about the rut is that they're very visible, but sometimes they're moving around so much they can be hard to keep up with.
Yeah, that was different than, say sheep or even mule deer. Sheep, when they're rutting the ewe around, and once in a while, if they get her running on a slope, 2 or 3 rams, it can be hard to try to kill them. But a lot of times, they're in a tight group, and the rams are farting around with each other and kicking each other and all that, and you're just literally waiting for them to segregate. But yeah, these coues, I didn't ever see a deer that I tried to kill that was doing that. But there was a lot of younger bucks, 80 to 100-inch type deer that I thought, man, it'd be hard to kill that deer. It's just not nonstop, relentless. And I saw some pretty neat behavior of does run in and dive and literally come to a running stop and bed down, and they were hiding from the bucks, and those bucks would just hound dog them out after about 5 minutes and root them out. It was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, a lot of times I always joke, it reminds me a lot of my high school days when I was trying to get a date, and I always had the girls running away from me. But they're sure persistent. From looking at a lot of different rutting animals, for sure those Coues deer bucks, no matter their size, they just seem to dog those does, and they're just chasing them constantly. So it makes for a really fun hunt. Yep. I'm glad you got to enjoy it, and I'm glad you kind of got the bug for Coues deer. I mean, it's one of those animals I tell people all the time, unless you go hunt them, you can't really understand it. But once you do, most people I know are just hooked on them.
Yeah, and I knew I probably would be, and I joked to my wife when I got home, I got another habit. So anyway.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, today I want to talk about Utah. I know the the application period for Utah is now open online, and I believe the deadline is March 3rd coming up. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I want to go over the Utah draw and go over all the different animals to apply for. And first, I'd like you to kind of briefly go over the Utah draw system for those listeners maybe that aren't very familiar or that haven't applied. Kind of walk me through a kind of an A to Z how the system works.
Okay, like you said, the deadline to apply for a hunt is March 3rd. If you are only going to do a preference point only application, they extend that through until March 17th. But yeah, if you're picking your units and you want to get in and consider to draw a hunt, March 3rd is the time to be in. Utah, for all of their limited entry and once in a lifetime species, limited entry deer, elk, and antelope, as well as all the moose, sheep, goat, bison, they run a modified preference and bonus point draw where 50% of the tags go to the highest point applicants for that individual hunt, and the other 50% go randomly. We do have in Utah set aside quotas for resident and non-resident. So when you look at the odds sheets, you can see how many tags were available last year for non-residents and how many applied and what the maximum point holders were. A little bit different than, say, Arizona, where non-residents are awarded up to 10% per hunt. Utah's a set aside. There's rounding involved, but it's roughly 10, some are as high as 15%. So if you do have a lot of points for a certain species, it's somewhat predictable when you might draw. Not as predictable as, say, Colorado, where they're 100% preference, but if you got a lot of points, you can simply look at the units with the points you had that you might have drawn last year, and barring, crossovers from another unit or people coming out of the woodwork that were doing points only or whatever, you might be able to somewhat predict that you might be able to get a tag. Utah rounds. In the case of odd permits, they round in the favor of the random draw. And what that means is if there's only one non-resident permit available, it always will go in the random draw. So everybody has a chance to draw any tag in Utah every year, albeit maybe a slim chance. When there's 2 tags, obviously 50-50. If you get to 3, then there'll be 2 in the random and 1 in the preference. They always round in the favor of the random draw. The only exception to this is with general season deer hunts, and those are a true preference system. Many of you that apply may remember that you get to apply for general season deer and the limited entry deer. they run the limited entry deer draw first, and so if you don't draw something like a Henry's or Ponsagon or something in that round, you can then be considered in the general season draw, and they have their own preference points for those, and those go to the maximum point holders. Now, most of them don't take many to draw. Many you can draw with 0 to 1 point, some take 2 or 3. But that's kind of a breakdown in general how their draw works. It's an online application process. Non-residents, well, everybody have to buy a $65 hunting license as a non-resident, and then it's $10 per species. And so it really makes sense, if you're going to consider applying in Utah, to apply for all the species that you're interested in, not just say, hey, I'm a deer guy, I'm going to put in for deer, that's $75, because you can add, for another 20 or $30, add 2 or 3 more species and be building points for them and get a little bit more bang for the buck out of that license purchase. Now, one tidbit that Utah's never closed this loophole. Many people take advantage of it, but they issue a 365-day license, much like Arizona does. But in Utah, if you have a valid hunting license, at the day you apply, that's all they care about. And so many people will apply sometime in mid to late February one year, and the next year, as long as you apply before that 365-day license is up, you won't have to buy another 65-day license. You can kind of get a 2-for-1. So keep that in mind. I don't know of any other state that really allows you to, that doesn't want your money, I guess. but take advantage of it. If they're not going to close the loophole, I know many people that do, including, I do that for some of my wife and daughters that don't hunt something every single year, do it that way, save a little bit of money.
Absolutely. Let's take a quick break here, hear from our sponsors, and we'll get right back into drawing tags in Utah here.
At GoHunt.com, we are restoring the heritage of the old and constantly redefining the new. We stay focused and put our efforts into redefining the future of Western hunting. What makes us special? What makes us different? We are the new breed of hunter. We are the customers that we serve. We are the innovators, and we are the future. Visit GoHunt.com/insider and join the movement.
Use the J. Scott promo code when signing up and receive a $50 KUIU gift card. Have you guys heard about PhoneScope? PhoneScope is a privately held company that makes custom-molded, precisely engineered smartphone digiscoping adapters. Photographing wildlife has never been easier. Take digiscoping photos and videos from your smartphone and share them with your friends. PhoneScope stands behind their product with a 100% money-back guarantee. PhoneScope is the future of digiscoping. Get yours now. Use the JScott16 promo code and receive 10% discount on all purchases. Check them out at PhoneScope, that's PhoneSkope.com, or on Instagram at PhoneScope. Okay, Adam, I want to talk to you about, are there any changes to the 2016 draw, or are there any changes as far as things that the DWR has made acceptable or not acceptable that you know of?
There are a couple of sheep units opening up. There's most of those are just apply to residents. There's a couple new sheep units for Rocky Mountain Bighorn. There are some muzzleloader deer hunts that are general season in October, but they have added more of the limited entry muzzleloader seasons for them in, I believe the dates are November 2nd to the 10th. These are general season deer units, but they're issuing limited entry hunts for them with a muzzleloader in early November. I really think some of these hunts are going to be great this year. They will use your limited entry points, even though they're managed as a general season unit, for $18 to $20 per 100 does versus the 30 or 40 plus bucks per 100 does. Because of the dates this year, with all the dates falling back with the calendar shift, that's the November 2nd to the 10th, and we haven't had those dates to hunt deer with a muzzleloader in Utah for 20 plus years, since I was in high school or just at them. So that's a pretty significant change. The other probably biggest change has to do with muzzleloader equipment, and that is that the Wildlife Board adopted a policy change that allows magnified scopes on muzzleloaders, essentially making it very similar to what you have down in Arizona. So I anticipate muzzleloader hunting in Utah this year, especially, to get even more popular and the hunts to be, harder to draw. There's no way they should get easier to draw with that change, which, used to be open sights or one power magnification only. Some people's eyes just don't work well, particularly people that get a little bit older that just can't focus on front and rear open sights or even those one powers or have a hard time. So, there's people that maybe don't have the absolute maximum number of points. I could see them falling out of the rifle and going chasing some of these muzzleloader tags now. And that's probably the single biggest change I hear about and got people buzzing the most up here.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think it opens up muzzleloader hunting. There'll be a lot more people that apply for it. I agree with you 100%. Let's dive right into the elk and discuss the general, the limited entry, the archery, the muzzy, early rifle, and the late hunts. And I guess maybe cover, say, you can do it however you want. Maybe break down the top 3 units or 5 units or whatever you want, and then maybe talk about maybe some middle tier units. And for non-residents that are applying, you brought up a good point. They have to make sure that if they've got a bunch of points, some of these units don't even allow a non-resident hunt. So can you talk to me about elk in Utah?
Real quickly addressing the general season elk hunting. We do have some over-the-counter general season elk hunting in Utah. The most of the units where you could hunt any bull are up in northern Utah, along the Wasatch Front, units that are heavily private land, where they don't manage, for super trophy. They have a lot of liberal harvest, and that's to appease a lot of the private land pressures and demands. The exception to that is the high Uintas wilderness area. It's just vast, classic elk country. We don't kill giant bulls up there in Utah, but it's an opportunity hunt. It wouldn't be as good, in my opinion, as going to, say, Colorado or one of these other hunts and just picking an over-the-counter unit. The bulk of the rest of the hunts in Utah for general season bull hunting are spike only on our limited entry hunts. So we do have plenty of opportunity, but as a non-resident, it's not as good of general season elk hunting opportunity that some of these other states have. However, on our limited entry, we're great. We hunt bulls every single day in September and even through the first week of October with various weapon types, and not many states do that. We begin with the archery hunt. This year, all the dates in Utah shifted later, and that's just due to the start of our archery seasons falling back 5 days, opening on the 20th of August and going to the 16th. And that's going to help archery elk hunters, although the 16th, by no stretch of the imagination, is, super deep into the rut. Sometimes they can just really be barely getting going the last few days of that hunt, but it is what it is. The rifle hunt then goes September 17th to the 25th, and then the muzzleloader hunt picks up on the 26th of September right after that. So literally, take your pick. Odds will almost always be better for the archery, and then the late rifle and muzzleloader, and then the early rifle, that's 17th to the 25th, very similar to your early rifle hunts in Arizona. Those are the cream of the crop, incredibly tough to draw. But if you get one, you've really got something. Our elk in Utah, while a lot of people say they're not as good as they once were, and I probably would agree with that, I think we really had it so good for so long through the early to mid to late 2000s that, permit numbers just didn't quite keep up with the number of giant bulls that we had, and they finally did, and things have moderated, but we still have really good elk hunting. And I would probably say, these units aren't any secret to anybody, but San Juan, Fillmore Pavant, Beaver, Plateau Boulder, Southwest Desert, that would probably be my top 5 if you say what are the best odds that I could kill a really big bull, a 375 type or better bull. That doesn't mean other units in a tier below that don't have them, but those units are managed that I just mentioned are managed in that for an average age of harvest of 7 to 8 years. That's the highest age bracket in the Utah elk management plan. So you have more bulls and more older bulls simply because tag numbers stay lower. Other units are managed in that 5 to 6 year old category, and there's a lot of great units, and the bulk of Utah units are probably in that classification. You know, the Book Cliffs, the Manti, the Fish Lake, the Monroe, the Mount Dutton, you know, Panguitch Lake, units like that, LaSalle Mountain, still produce 375 plus bulls on them, but I would say the bulk of the top end bulls killed or are more in that 350 to 370 range, and those are big bulls. It's just again, they have a few more tags. There's a few exceptions within those units, and the management plan doesn't manage for an average age of harvested bulls quite as high as those other units I mentioned. It really kind of just comes down, and I really stress this, whether it be people calling me to you know, as part of my guiding and outfitting business or our license application and consulting business, Epic Outdoors, I just tell guys, you need to put in for the unit that you would be happy for. Everybody would want the best, and you know, but the odds reflect that. If you're happy with 330 bulls and would be ecstatic with them, put in for the units that have the best drawing odds where you can kill those type of bulls. Don't just simply follow the mainstream and put in for the best of the best, because you know you may never draw something like that. Be realistic, and with the weapon types spread out the way they are, and the late hunts, there's ways to do that. I think our late hunts are way underrated in Utah. They're about the same dates as your late hunts in Arizona a week or two earlier, but they're have nowhere near the number of tags that you have in Arizona. We still hunt our limited entry mature bulls very conservatively. So those are great hunts, and there are definitely some late hunts that are better than others that are more glassable. You know, Pavant, Beaver, because of some burns, Mount Dutton, some of those come to mind that are some of the better late hunts because bulls are pulled off by themselves. They're in small batch groups again, just worn out and trying to put weight back on.
Are those hunts, are those bulls patternable, and do you feel like, you know, you said they're kind of underrated in your mind, but you think if you had the time to really put into them, whereas our late hunts in Arizona seem like there's so many tags, it becomes somewhat of a rat race. Are the late hunts in Utah actually kind of a sleeper to kill a big bull?
Yeah, they are, and the drawing odds are good. Everybody wants to hunt elk in September. That's when elk are made to be hunted if you can get a tag somehow. Most states allow that with archery only. Utah doesn't. You can do that with any weapon, and you got those options. But that late hunt, because there's really not that many tags, in many of these units you're talking 20, 30, 40 tags. Some of the bigger units, they may, you know, Manti or Wasatch, you're going to have a lot more. But if you get there early, they're not that long hunt. They're 7 to 9 days. But if you can get there 5 days early and scout and find a bull, where they are is where they're going to stay. They're not moving and chasing cows and doing all that. If you find a bull in a canyon held up somewhere, he's just pretty much back in a feeding and bedding routine, and it's a great time to kill one if you can get there and find them. And some of these units, you know, bulls pull into them from other units. Mountain Dutton's one of those, but it borders a lot of other units. Mountain Dutton's got a lot better winter range than some of the others because of all the burns, and it sucks a lot of bulls to it from Boulder and Monroe and whatnot. And, you know, a few other units like that have instances of that occurs in Utah that make the great late hunts. They're cold and they're not, you know, the glamorous rut bugle hunts, but, you know, if guys have low numbers of points, you really got to look at the writing on the wall and say, okay, am I really ever going to draw an early rifle hunt if I'm already 10 points behind where the maximum point tags are going now? The answer is no. And so you look at another weapon, and if you are a rifle hunter, look at that late rifle hunt, or if not, you know, consider the muzzleloader now where you now can throw a scope on it.
Yeah, for sure. One thing as a non-resident, I always look at the Utah booklet, and it doesn't list, like, say, for the Pavant or, say, the Dutton or the Beaver, the late hunts. How come it doesn't actually list how many permits they're going to be? I mean, I don't know as a non-resident whether there's 15 tags or there's, 1,500 tags. Can you tell me kind of a rough idea of on some of these units? Are we talking hundreds of tags, or what are we talking?
On these top-end units that we're talking about, like San Juan, Beaver, Boulder, Pavant, South, you're talking 15 or 10 to 25 late tags, and that's it, total. That's not non-residents, that's total. And so it's a very
that's
limited...
unit-wide. That's unit-wide. You're the only hunter, so it's not like there's a lot of those a lot of the archery hunts and a lot of the muzzleloader hunts, they have, muzzleloader deer, they have other things going on. Are most of those late hunts just really the only hunt going on?
Yes, there's no, they even stagger the cow hunts around them. That there's usually nothing going on in the late hunt except for that. And the reason that Utah used to list the permit numbers in the application booklet, they used to have our application season a little bit later in the spring, and they moved it up to January, February, 4 or 5 years ago. And when they did that, obviously they don't have last year's harvest and tooth data to analyze yet, nor have they done their winter surveys or seen the severity of any winter that we're going to have. So it is, I hear a lot of complaints about that. People don't know how many tags they're going to give. And really all you have to go off for now is to look at the drawing odds for last year and look at how many tags they gave last year. And a lot of times you can't get the complete picture or an exact number, but later towards the end of the application period, late February or early March, you might get lucky enough and have some of the tooth data to be available by then, and the biologist will be able to give you an idea. Yeah, we're way over, I'm going to have to increase, or nope, we're about right on par, we're going to stay right where we're at. You normally don't see big swings in the late hunts in permit numbers unless they have a specific reason to do it, which, if you had a unit or two in mind, you'd probably touch base with the biologist in February, or, not just for the late hunt, but for any of these hunts, and say, okay, do you anticipate going up dramatically, down dramatically, or anything that would, affect my drawing odds? And where it really comes into play, and I hear this is the biggest complaint, is when a unit is getting on that threshold of issuing, say, only one non-resident permit or two non-resident permits, or going from 2 permits down to 1. Somebody applies for a unit thinking there's going to be 2 tags, I should get the max point tag, the division cuts the permit slightly and only gives 1 non-resident tag, and it goes in the random draw, and those people are pretty upset. So it is an inconvenience. There are many other states, Colorado, Wyoming, a lot of these states don't publish their set numbers in their regulations. All you have to go off of is what last year issued, and if you really think you're on the verge of drawing something, the best thing to do is try to get in touch with the game biologist and say, hey, do you anticipate anything big, up or down? And, hopefully you guess right.
Yeah, and as the service you offer through Epic Outdoors, you are personally in contact with a lot of these, so you have a lot of that inside knowledge as well, correct?
Yes, but particularly on some of these units. Well, for sheep especially, that doesn't really factor in for non-residents, but any sheep unit that's going to go from 2 tags to 1 tag or 1 tag to 2 tags, it can make a big difference on where somebody wants to apply with the max point with maximum point. And similarly on some of the other once in a lifetime, and in cases with non-residents, particularly where they're on the brink of 1 non-resident tag or 2, 15 roughly is the magic number. When Utah issues about 15 permits on a unit, they'll start giving 2 non-resident tags. So whenever you're right around that 13 to 16 range, it can be volatile year to year on whether they go up slightly or down slightly, could shave or add a non-resident permit, and allow you to sneak in and steal a maximum point tag if they add it, or maybe apply for something that you now don't have a guarantee of drawing if it goes just in the random draw.
Sure. Let's take another quick break here.
Utah Hydrographics is in the water transfer printing service, and they are open to whatever you can dream up. Choose from a wide range of camo patterns, designs, and colors. Whether it's guns, bows, tools, rifle stocks, vehicles, steering wheels, fenders, dashboards, paint guns, fishing rods, cups, tripods, watches, knife grips, helmets for a local sports team or for your motorcycle, picture frames, mailbox, animal skulls, you name it, they can probably do it. Utah Hydrographics loves taking things that are general looking and turns them into something that looks fantastic and eye-popping. Give them a call and see what they can do for you and receive up to a 10% discount by using the JScott16 promo code. Visit them at utahhydrographics.com or on Instagram at Utah Hydrographics. Whether you are interested in elk, deer, antelope, bighorn sheep, or moose, Western Hunter and Elk Hunter magazines will bring the adventure to your mailbox. These publications feature articles on the finest hunting gear, tips and tactics from experienced hunters, field judging trophies, glassing techniques, calling strategies, and much more. To become a more knowledgeable and skilled hunter, subscribe today. Go to westernhunter.net/jscott and enter your email address for a chance to win a $1,500 credit towards any Swarovski product.
That's great stuff with the elk draw. How was the elk season this year for you from an outfitting standpoint with Bronson Outfitting? And maybe tell me a little story or two about how your hunts went, maybe something in particular.
I would characterize the hunts last year in Utah as overall average, and in some cases they were tough. We had some pretty warm weather throughout September. We had some pretty warm weather throughout September, at least in some of the units I spent time in, and that just seemed to delay the rut a little bit. And even towards late September, when the muzzleloader hunt was going, on some units it just didn't seem to be, going that strong. Other units I heard from other people were going great. We spent some time on the San Juan and the Boulder, and hunted the San Juan early, 15th of August, early opener for an archery hunt. But we were hunting a couple of giant bulls that we'd watched all year long, and you mentioned it earlier. You've got general season elk hunters, you've got general season deer hunters, all hitting the field at the same time, and there wasn't anybody doing anything intentional, but it just had people running into our bulls, and they were smartening up real quick, realizing, hey, the game's starting to change. We're not just eating groceries and filling our bellies all summer anymore. Things are getting real. So we weren't able to connect on one of those big bulls there, and our hunter came back a little bit later in September when the rut started and killed a nice bull, his first bull with the bow. But the Boulder was a great hunt last year. We killed a few bulls on there. There's always bulls that slip through your fingers on that unit because it's so thick and flat, and you just got to get in the middle of them and chase bugle to bugle for the most part of that unit. But I was there with the early rifle hunter, along with a good friend of mine, guiding. We killed a nice 375 bull 3 or 4 days into the early rifle hunt, and the bulls, first few days of that hunt, it was hot, dry, dusty. Your optics were just coated. It's like, man, this is gonna be tough. And then it turned off and cut loose and cooled down and rained, and it was a switch went off, and it was incredible all throughout then. And then my brother guided the muzzleloader hunt there. It was a great hunt. So I don't spend time on every elk unit, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, our desert sheep hunt starts the same day in Utah as our early rifle elk, and so depending on how the draw turns out, I may be on that elk hunt or I may be hunting sheep, and so we normally take a bunch of sheep hunters, and if we get a bunch of them booked and set up before some of the elk guys call, I end up unfortunately have to pass on some of those. But overall, it was a good year. I would say banner. I think everybody is more optimistic about this year, knowing the dates are going to shift a little bit later for all seasons, kind of centering more towards the rut.
What is the moisture forecast? How's it looking there? I know it's pretty early to tell, but what are you looking like so far?
Yeah, based on right now, and I'm in southern Utah, but the southern third of the state has been great. The San Juan is holding as much snow as they've had in a lot of winters for this early, in the winter. And a lot of the time we get a lot of our moisture in the late winter, early spring storms throughout March and stuff. So if things continue, or even if it didn't get much from here on out, things are going to be just fine. We've had a really good moisture year. We got dumped on here about a week or 10 days ago in southern Utah. We got 16 plus inches here at my house in Cedar City in one storm in about 24 hours. It kind of debilitated town, but that's at 5,500 feet. And I think some of that clipped northern Arizona and Flag and whatnot too. So, we track a lot in southern Utah, similar to the Strip and the northern Arizona units, and all things are pointing to be this is definitely average or above average moisture for this stage of the winter.
Good. And for those guys out there that say, have 8 to 10 points and they're listening to this episode and, they feel like their odds aren't very good, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of these units that just have one archery tag, anybody has a chance and everybody has basically the equal chance. Is that correct? As a non-resident?
Yep. You can draw the first year. I've taken desert sheep hunters as non-residents that drew with 0 points. So that's the extreme. Out of 3,000 or 4,000 applicants that, ranging from 0 to 20 points, he had one name in the hat. You get a name in the hat in the random draw for your application and one for each of your bonus points. They end up, issuing you the lowest number out of however many of those choices you get, and that's the number you're assigned. But yes, you can draw any year. And so some states, people become disenfranchised with certain draw systems. I think that's probably what led Arizona to consider the change that they recently did. So much like Arizona, Utah's the same way. You can draw any tag any year you apply for it in Utah. There's nothing that is mathematically impossible to draw.
That's awesome. I've got 16 elk points in Utah, and, obviously with the dates bumping back those 4 or 5 days, to the 16th of September, that's something definitely I'm eyeballing for archery. On the downside of that, I believe the full moon is the September 18th. And so even though those dates bump back to the 16th of September, it's the last day of the archery hunt there will be 2 days away from the full moon.
Yep.
My question to you would be, do you think that full moon is going to negate those extra 4 or 5 days in that, it won't be full, but it'll be pretty darn bright? And how do you think that full moon kind of falling right in the smack dab middle of the early rifle hunts and such is going to affect that hunt?
I think it definitely can impact it and has a tendency, from my experience, to compound things when you have a hot, high-pressure camped over you. If you get into a rainy pattern, it's cool and rainy and all that, it seems like things just go. But if you've got a high-pressure camped over you, which I know some of the northern Arizona units can get that way, just like we can, and it's 70 or pushing sometimes 80 degrees during the middle of the day, and you've got a full moon, that's when I've seen it probably affect things the most. And obviously we can't predict what the weather's going to be leading up to it, but if you can get some of those cooler storms and rains and cool fronts coming from the north down to trigger the rut as much as anything, and I think it tends to mask the influence of the moon. But I've seen when you get the full moon with a 80-degree high pressure sitting over you with no end in sight for 10 days, it can be a long hunt because those bulls really do the most of their activity 30 minutes, before dark and all night long, and shut up, half hour to an hour after daylight.
Yeah, it can make it tough for sure. So I'm looking at it. What kind of intrigues me is the muzzleloader season. More than anything, obviously an early rifle tag would be awesome, but I just don't have enough points for, say the top 5 units for that. But the muzzleloader season intrigues me, even though it goes after the archery, after the early rifle. But from a bugling aspect, I think this year in Utah, that muzzy season will probably be off the hook as far as bugling.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, it usually always is. This year, it shifted to as late as it normally is. And that'll just mean that perhaps if the archery and early rifle hunts are really good, they may take a few more giant bulls home before you get a chance. But it's not going to be without having intense rut action. It's going to be a great hunt, And even into the 1st of October, some units that that first week in October, they still just go crazy. So it would be a great hunt if you don't have a lot of points or, trying to, work around another schedule. Archery seasons in other states are obviously beneficial more during that 10th to 15th of September through the 25th or 30th. That's when most states are. And, you could do the Utah archery hunt and be done right before that, or do the muzzleloader hunt and hunt, after some of the other state archery hunts are over.
For sure. In regards to bugling, taking out the size of bulls, if you had to say the top 3 units over your lifetime, what you've witnessed, regardless of size of bulls, what would you say your top 3 just chaos bugling units are?
Well, last year we had one of those nights on the boulder that was one you'll remember for the rest of your life. It was just one of those things like you're almost like you're invisible, and you've probably been there, Jay. Like the elk don't even know you're walking amongst them. They're so preoccupied with screaming and fighting and carrying on, and you're just literally walking through the middle of them, it felt like. And so Boulder and San Juan, I would say, and that's, a little biased perhaps because I've probably spent the most time on those units, but I've hunted a lot of other units. And partly is because of what I mentioned earlier. They have a higher bull-cow ratio and a higher age structure on it. So you have a lot more 6-plus-year-old bulls running around that all think they're, something special and screaming their guts out. But I'd say those two they're hard to beat. They really are.
For sure. Let's talk about, I guess I should say, is there anything else with elk that you think we didn't cover that we need to?
No, I think that's probably pretty good cover on elk.
Okay, let's talk about deer and the archery deer and the limited entry and the muzzleloader deer and basically mirror what we just talked about with elk and explain some of the ins and outs of Utah deer hunting, which I know is dear to your heart.
Yeah, I love big deer. Unfortunately, Utah issues about 1,000, maybe 1,250 limited entry deer permits, and that's it. Contrast that to about 85 to 90,000 general season permits. So there's a big bottleneck for even residents, but especially non-residents, for deer tags. There's just not enough, tags being pulled out and people removed at a fast enough rate to really unclog the log jam, so to speak. But what we do have are very excellent. The clear, no-brainer number 1 unit in the state is the Henry Mountains, and that's very well known. There are a tag for non-residents in all 3 hunts, archery, rifle, and muzzleloader hunt. It's as good a deer hunt as you may ever get in your life if you're lucky enough to ever draw a tag. Behind that, the Paunsaugunt unit, over the last 6 to 10 years, through permit cuts and different things, and now some highway fencing and habitat projects that have gone on the Wind Range, all signs just keep pointing that that's just continuing to gradually get better. And the bucks that come off it every year kind of bear evidence of that. The archery hunt is phenomenal. It's a great time to hunt pattern deer that you've maybe been able to scout, or your guide scouted all year long, and hunt them the first crack. The muzzleloader being the end of September on that unit sometimes can be tough. It's not a great open country, big vast slopes, sit on your butt in glass all day. It's not that kind of unit for the muzzleloader hunt. So deer have rubbed their velvet by late September, can get kind of tough to dig out. You got to have some insight and hunt 1 or 2 specific bucks and stick with that. The rifle hunt this year, because of these date shifts that we've been talking about, is now shifted as late as it normally goes till the 30th of October. That unit's a very highly migratory deer herd, and they move from north to south down towards the Red Rock stuff, down east of Kanab. And, although it's harder to hunt a pre-scouted deer on that rifle hunt because they've migrated on you, you're going to be, anybody could come around the corner or walk over the next ridge and kill a 200-inch plus buck, almost accidentally. You've got to be in the right place at the right time, but it's a little bit more of that way. And you'll see a lot of deer. It's a good hunt for 180 to 200-inch deer, Not as many 200-inch plus deer killed as probably people would anticipate or hope with the number of points it takes to draw, but it's got great genetics and it's a great hunt. Then you kind of get into units right after that, like San Juan Elk Ridge, Fillmore Oak Creek, in my opinion, is perhaps the next couple best units. The Oak Creek is a good unit. They've made some boundary changes on that this year that over time I think will help solidify the number of deer that were getting killed. Part of that unit was a general season unit in the past, and now it's all limited entry on the east side, and so I think that'll preserve some deer from getting killed on the general season hunt. But it's a steep, rugged mountain range. It's got low densities. We've reintroduced California bighorns onto the Oak Creek in the last 2 to 3 years, put another 50 head there this winter off of Antelope Island. So you need to be willing to hike and get off the beaten path. It's steep and rugged, but there's some good deer coming off it, and doesn't have a lot of tags. Similar to San Juan Elk Ridge. San Juan Elk Ridge, I'm a big proponent of the archery and the muzzleloader hunts there. Those deer also sometimes by the rifle hunt at the end of October will migrate, and they get off the plateau off of Elk Ridge into some of the cedar, nasty canyon stuff, and it can get a lot harder on the rifle hunt, especially with later dates like this year. I'm not a big fan of that Elk Ridge rifle hunt unless somebody's got the time to dedicate to hunt the desert areas and hunt resident deer down in the desert. But the archery and muzzleloader hunt are fantastic there. Then the Book Cliffs, the Vernon, maybe the Dolores Triangle. Those hunts, I would expect 160 to 180 bucks. Book Cliffs has a lot of deer. It's a great hunt for people that just want to see a lot of deer, and it's not physical. It doesn't produce a lot of 180 or 190 plus deer. It just doesn't. But it's a great hunt for people that just have mid-range points, maybe 160 to 175 type bucks they're happy with, and the late dates will make that a good hunt too. Those deer migrate off the top, get concentrated somewhat down on the winter range by the last several days of that hunt. It's a fun hunt for anybody of all ages. Vernon's not quite as many high deer density, but I would put the size expectations similar, although there do seem to be a few 190 plus deer that always come out of Vernon. But that's probably, with the exception of those late muzzleloader hunts that I've addressed earlier, which again, like on the Zion, Pine Valley, Plateau Boulder, maybe Fillmore Pavant, they all have those now limited entry muzzleloader deer hunts November 2nd to the 10th. Again, these are general season units still. They're units that just got their brains hunted hard out of them for 9 days, the 22nd to the 30th of October. 3 days later, you get to start with a muzzleloader, but very limited numbers of tags. We're talking in most of those units, they've been issuing only around, 8 to 10 total tags. Maybe 1 or maybe 2 non-residents is it. So it would be a limited entry feel in terms of not very many people there, but the age structure is not like it is on our limited entry unit. But the dates this year, especially on units like Zion, where migratory deer show up off other units like Pontagon, it has the potential to be a really, really good hunt.
So what you're saying from a date perspective, the dates actually turn them into probably a pretty darn good hunt.
Yeah, last year it was just early. This year, with 5 days later, has the potential to be great. If you get some kind of weather event towards the end of the general season rifle hunt or the very beginning of that muzzleloader hunt, and by weather I mean a bunch of rain or snow in the high country that just gets deer moving down and starts to trigger maybe some rut activity, that could be a great hunt, no question.
Since 1982, the Outdoorsman's in Phoenix has made it their goal to provide the very best customer service combined with the latest and greatest optics and accessories in the business. Outdoorsman's is the leading designer and manufacturer of high-quality tripods and mounting accessories for any hunter's optical needs. Go to outdoorsmans.com or call 1-800-291-8065 and use the JScott promo code until February 28th to receive 10% off all Outdoorsman's packs and pack accessories. Wilderness Athlete is committed to improving the health and quality of life for the outdoor athlete by providing field-tested, scientifically validated nutrition and sports performance products. Check them out at wildernessathlete.com and use the JScott promo code to receive 10% off any order in February 2016. Awesome. Tell me about some of your deer hunts over the last couple years from either a personal perspective or from a guiding perspective, maybe some of the highlights. I know you guys have killed some great big deer. So tell me a few stories.
Well, it seems like, for me and my schedule, I mean, even though I'm an outfitter, I end up, being along on probably 80% of the hunts that I book as an outfitter. And that's mainly because I love to hunt. And if I don't have a tag personally somewhere in Utah or another state, the next best thing is going hunting on a unit that I'd just as soon be myself. Having said that, any sheep hunts or trophy deer hunts in Utah is where I personally like to make sure that I get to go. And, the Henry Mountains is one of those places that it's really hard not to have my schedule revolve around that to some extent, whether it's in the muzzleloader or the rifle hunt. We usually will have, between 1 to 4 hunters down there spread out on the different seasons. And, we've been there for about 10 years and been very fortunate through a lot of hard work to take some great deer. And every one you take just makes you want to be back there and take another one, just as bad. That's the thing about big mule deer is everyone's configured and looks a little bit different. And people that love them, you want every big one you've ever seen in your life. You want one like it on your wall. And that's probably the case with me. We were fortunate enough this last year to guide a gentleman from Utah. He had maximum points. He put in 20 years and drew the muzzleloader hunt. And through our scouting efforts, we turned up a deer that we've been watching the last 2 years. This year's the third year, and he was finally the one to hunt. And we were fortunate enough after 5 days to let Troy, our hunter, get in position and to take that deer with his muzzleloader. Made a great shot, just over 200 yards. And the 235-inch official gross scoring deer nets 230, so he makes all-time Boone and Crockett non-typical. He also nets 197.5 as a typical. So he's one of those rare deer that officially would go both ways. He did get entered as a non-typical 230. And Safari Club International score, which is very similar to Boone and Crockett gross. They just don't take the net deductions of symmetry or abnormal points. And he's just 217 and 7/8, so almost 218, and is the new world record typical muzzleloader mule deer ever killed. He's a terrific deer. He'll actually be in our Epic Outdoors booth, number 2945 at the Western Hunting Conservation Expo, along with several other giant deer that friends or we've been a part of in one way, shape, or form this year. So, yeah, stop by and see it. He's a great deer. He's fortunately, I got a set of replicas of him, but he's one of those deer that I just look at all day long and never get sick of. He's just a tremendous deer. So,
what is it about deer? And, I tell people this a lot, too. They're like, well, they look at Coues deer and they're like, well, man, you shot quite a few Coues deer. And, some people will say, well, they all, a lot of them look a lot alike. And I sit there and go, what do you mean? They don't look anything alike. They all look different. Every one of them has their own characteristic. And I think, you can only explain it. You don't have to explain it to another hunter. You only have to explain it to non-hunters.
Yeah.
But the thing about deer for me is any deer that's different than what I've already shot, it's like you want it. You're like,
yep.
Man, that's got a cheater here. It's got a kicker here. It's wide. It's narrow. It's tall. It's,
yep.
It's a heavy buck. It may not have long points, but I don't have a heavy one like that, or he's got, multiple eye guards. It's amazing how, and I think that's what the intrigue is with deer across this country, whether it be whitetail, mule deer, Coues deer, whatever, is, they're all so unique. And I think, and I'd like you to maybe speak on this. You talk about watching deer for a couple years in a row. Some of those deer are unbelievably smart, and then there's some deer that you shake your head and say, "Why are you standing right there? What are you doing? Go hide." But for the most part, big mule deer don't get big by being stupid.
No, that's right, and you're right. I mean, I think mule deer. I haven't hunted coos enough to really be able to say this about them, but it seems like of all the species I like to hunt, mule deer have the most variation in configuration. I mean, I love to hunt sheep, and you and I both know there's certain rams that are flares, tight to the head, have overlay, don't, but they still have a curly horn. You know what I mean? They don't have cheaters. They're all curly spikes. Deer have everything going, and that's part of the allure. The other thing is, maybe for me and a lot of us out west, I know this is probably true, is we were born, I was born in the early 70s. The time as I started to hunt, deer hunting was still pretty dang good in Utah, but over my lifetime, it really declined. Not here, but almost every western state, and most states have to institute draws and things like that, and that's the system we operate under now. It is just simply so hard to put your hands on a true giant, 190, 200-inch plus deer anywhere, that when you get to do that, you just, the drive to want to do it again just makes you want to work harder and find the next spot. You've got to try to make something out of nothing sometimes with general season tags, and then get lucky and draw tags, or earn them in the case of like Colorado or places that make you accumulate points, or, in some cases acquire landowner tags. But I think part of it is just big mule deer. There's just not enough of them to go around. It's not the good old days, and so we treat them like gold, and as far as I'm concerned, they are like gold.